In this lesson, we'll have a look at various types of lights and their settings that Blender offers. We will switch to a render preview mode of our scene, so that we do not see everything in this shaded mode. And immediately this will switch you to the preview of your render. You can see that it takes a little while for this to render. That's because we are currently in the ray tracing render called Cycles. Without going too deep into this, Cycles computes accurate lighting models, and it takes some time before it produces the final image. There is, however, another render engine that you can use. That's because EVBEG. A lot of the computations to achieve precisely this sort of seamless viewport experience. It's better to demonstrate the techniques, and the lighting quality can actually be on a similar level to Cycles. And with these, you will generally manage all types of lighting scenarios. This is a light that originates in one point and radiates to all sides. So immediately, we can jump here and increase the intensity of the light, or as it's called in Blender, the power. This is measured in real-world units called watts. More watts means more light intensity. The color attribute is clear. And their usage in one whole chapter, which is chapter 4. Basically, the larger a light source, the softer the light and the shadow get. Because it comes from more angles, and it gets diffused on our object. But this is actually a great demonstration. All the light rays will come out of this smaller spot, and the lighting gets more crisp. And the highlights are more stark, since they are reflecting a smaller light source. And speaking of the highlights, and diffused light, you can try fiddling with these two options. The general light cast on our object disappears. But these highlights, or rather the specular highlights, where the reflections are the brightest, they remain. That's something we'll get into later in the course. We can save some performance by limiting the area that the light illuminates. I like to use point lights for light source that really emanate from one point. A torch, a fire, lamps, and others. However, you should be cautious filling your scenes with lots of point lights, because these can be really heavy on the performance. Now, the actual sunlight is immensely large, and it fills our world with these sorts of parallel rays. And rotate it so that it shines on the back of our character. There are only a few differences in the settings here, but the important one now is probably the angle. It functions as the radius of different light sources, but this one is more physically correct. Rather, it changes the angle that it's hitting our geometry at. Higher values are more like a cloudy day scenario, while default lower values are bright sunlight, because it allows for this narrower source of light, which is fully controllable and much more performance friendly. And it can be really controlled when it comes to the area it illuminates. It basically simulates light point one would use on a real film set. The biggest difference here is the beam shape option. That one controls the cone of light and how wide it is. It makes the scene a tad too messy for my taste. And as opposed to the other lighting types, scaling this will actually make the quality different. This is basically the equivalent of changing the radius of a spot or point light. The only downside to area lights is that they tend to be a bit less performance friendly. A very powerful light, but do use it sparingly. One that I generally start with when adding a lighting to my scenes. That one is called high dynamic range lighting, and we'll discuss how to activate it in the very next lesson.